All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. Whenever we're looking at massive geopolitical shifts, it is incredibly tempting to look back at the past for a roadmap. And right now, analysts are looking at 2026 Russia, and honestly, they're seeing some incredibly familiar flashing red warning signs of the 1991 Soviet collapse. But is the system actually about to break? Well, today we're going to compare the final years of the USSR to Russia today, and we're going to use a very specific diagnostic checklist to do it. So if 2026 Russia has the exact same symptoms as the 1991 Soviet Union, why on earth isn't it collapsing? To figure out why this geopolitical patient isn't flatlining, we need to run 2026 Russia through the exact same checklist that historians use to explain the fall of the Soviet Union. And eerily enough, it scores positive on almost every single line, yet the system remains totally intact. To understand this paradox, we need to look at those symptoms. And more importantly, we really need to uncover the one massive variable keeping the current system afloat. Part 1. The Diagnostic Checklist. Parallels between 1991 and 2026. Let's start right off with massive fiscal shocks. Remember, Soviet oil completely crashed from $120 down to just $24 a barrel in the lead up to 1991. It absolutely gutted the budget that held the entire system together. Now, look at the parallel today. 2026, Russian oil and gas revenues are down roughly a third year on year. The fiscal strain here is massive. The federal deficit blew past its annual target in the very first quarter alone, which marks the absolute worst gap since 1996. Which brings us to the manpower drain of an unwinnable war. The Soviet war in Afghanistan cost roughly 15,000 dead over a decade, permanently poisoning the regime's legitimacy, right? But that literally pales in comparison to the modern conflict. Russia's war in Ukraine has cost an estimated 300,000 dead, with a staggering 35,000 lost in just March alone. To put that into perspective, they are losing soldiers way faster than they can actually recruit replacements. Next up on the checklist, leadership isolation and aging. The late Soviet leadership was famously this Politburo of ailing men in their 70s. Well, it's uncanny how perfectly the 2026 Security Council mirrors this exact thing. 6 of the 12 permanent members are over 70, and 4 of them are older than Putin himself. This isolated, aging structure has historians seriously warning that the country is entering a whole series of high-profile funerals. And the internal fractures? They're rhyming perfectly too. Back in 1991, the exit from the Soviet Union was spearheaded by the Baltic and Caucasus republics. Today, we're seeing similar geographic friction popping up. Places like Dagestan have produced the country's largest anti-war protests over conscription. Chechnya is quietly bracing for its own secession crisis. And perhaps most critically for the economy, donor regions like Tatarstan and Bashkortostan, places which pay way more into the federal budget than they ever get back, are showing documented rising resentment. The edges of the federation are literally fraying. Finally, we see the cracked elite symptom. The 1991 hardline coup against Gorbachev directly echoes the 2023 Wagner mutiny. In August 1991, an armed coup attempt collapsed in just 3 days when troops flat-out refused to fire on crowds in Moscow. Fast forward to June 2023, and we get the Wagner Mutiny, an armed column literally advancing on the capital before turning back. The symptom here is an undeniable, glaring fracture within the security apparatus itself.
Part 2. Where the rhyme breaks, the turning point.
This exact moment of elite fracture, this is where the historical rhyme just completely falls apart. Because unlike Gorbachev, whose government was entirely gone within 4 months of the 1991 coup, the modern outcome was drastically different. Putin absorbed the mutiny completely. The mutiny's leader was dead within 2 months, and Putin remains firmly in power 3 years later. So it's the exact same symptom, but a totally different immune response from the state. Let's move to part 3, the global trade lifeline, economic oxygen. So what is the economic oxygen keeping this supposedly terminal system alive? It's modern global trade. This is absolutely crucial to understand. The Soviet Union was economically isolated. Modern Russia, however, simply built a massive shadow fleet to move its energy around the globe. Just think about the explosion in size here, going from roughly 100 tankers in 2023 to nearly 350 in 2026. This isn't just some minor workaround. It is a massive restructuring of global shipping designed to bypass Western logistics entirely. This fleet directly connects Russia to massive buyers like China and India. They're moving discounted crude to willing partners who just have insatiable energy demands. The Soviet economy collapsed because it literally had nowhere else to turn. But today, the sheer scale of global trade provides this artificial life support system that simply did not exist during the Cold War. That deep integration into global trade, that is exactly why the empty shelves of 1990 aren't appearing in 2026. Part 4. A very different patient, survival by stagnation. Beyond global trade, there are two other structural differences that totally change the prognosis for our 2026 patient. First, this demographically collapsing and militarily exhausted system currently holds roughly 4,400 nuclear warheads. When you combine severe internal decay with the world's largest nuclear arsenal, you are looking at a situation that is vastly more dangerous than it is stable. It fundamentally changes the entire calculus. Second, look at how the leadership handles pressure. Gorbachev chose to loosen his system by opening the pressure valve, with glasnost and perestroika, which ultimately led to a rapid dissolution. Putin, having clearly learned from that exact moment, is making the total opposite choice. He's welding the system shut. A perfect example of this is the 2026 decree centralizing internet control, which is deliberately steering the country toward full digital isolation by 2033. He's making absolutely sure that the variable that ended the Soviet Union is never tried again. So when you combine these massive trade lifelines, a huge nuclear deterrent, and a welded shut domestic policy, what's the actual prognosis here? Well, while the non-military economy is sliding into shabby disrepair, it is actually competently managed at a tactical level. The rot is happening underneath. This means we're essentially looking at an accelerated version of late Soviet stagnation, a slow, grinding decay over time, rather than a sudden 1991-style imploding. Which leaves us with this final, really critical question to take away from our explainer today. Does history actually repeat itself, or is it just rhyming in a much, much more dangerous way? We've got a patient showing classic terminal symptoms, sure, but they're surviving on modern global trade while sitting on thousands of nukes. It's a stark reminder that while historical parallels are super fascinating, it's the differences that truly define the future. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.